Our guest today is Paul Pearce. Paul is president of the Americas for Great Demo and a member of the College of Coaches. Paul is recognized as one of the world's foremost leaders of discovery and demo methodologies for SaaS solutions. Paul earned his MBA from Eastern Illinois University after serving with distinction in the Illinois Air National Guard. Paul has held sales leadership positions with a number of global SaaS organizations, spearheading business development, strategic alliances, and field enablement functions. Today, Paul authors, lectures, and coaches sales organizations across the globe with an emphasis on effective discovery methodologies. An outdoorsman, Paul is a proud native of Arthur, Illinois. He now lives in South Dakota, where he hosts family and friends and shares his passions for the great outdoors. Our guest today is Paul Pearce. Paul is president of the Americas for Great Demo. Paul, welcome to Elevating Performance.
Hey, thanks, Mark. It's great to see you today.
Yeah, always great to see you, old friend. You have a 20-year history with Great Demo, which really puts you in a unique position. You've been coaching and teaching sales executives all over the planet for the better part of the last 2 decades, and a real practitioner of the entire methodology that Great Demo offers. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the life lessons and some of the key points that you see across the spectrum?
First, Great Demo and doing discovery. Essentially, we teach customers to do better discovery so they can do better demos and win a heck of a lot more. I help sales teams shift from feature-focused presentations to like buyer-centric conversations. I guess one of the key lessons I'm thinking about, Mark, is clarity beats complexity. Most demos are like bad first dates. Like one person talks about themselves the whole time and the other person just can't wait to leave. And so what I'm finding is like winning teams, they're the ones who stop performing and they start solving. We teach them to open with the outcome. At Great Demo, we actually talk about doing the last thing first, bring that end result and bring it right to the beginning and show that first. Of course, that comes from doing phenomenal discovery and understanding what your client wants. And then when you build that engagement, the questions start to flow naturally. They look at it and they say like, hey, that's exactly what I want, but how did you do it? The idea is we teach them to open with the outcome, not the origin story, and to treat your buyer's time like oxygen. It's precious and it's limited, and they don't want to give a whole lot to you. So get to the point.
That's kind of revolutionary because we all were taught the sequential method of how to do demonstrations. We procedurally went through how you do setup and how you do particular types of use cases, and it was very symmetric. And the concept of taking the most powerful punch and pulling it way up, that just kind of flips that totally on the head. And if you slow it down, it makes a heck of a lot more sense.
If you're a salesperson and you start your demo and the main meat of your conversation, when you're proving your solution with a corporate overview slide deck, stop. Don't do it. Nobody cares. Get to the point.
Yeah.
Because you haven't earned the right to talk about yourself yet. Right? If you can solve the customer's problem and they can see the value that you create for them, then they're going to be curious about what the implementation looked like and how your company was founded. Will you be there to support them? What's your customer sat scores? Those things are then relevant because they can see a future with you. But if they don't care. Then Mark, when you think about like the attention and the retention surveys, people remember what happens at the beginning and at the end, and they forget everything in the middle. And what you've done when you give that corporate presentation at the beginning, you've taken the most important time within the conversation and waste it with stuff they don't care about yet. So instead, move it to the end or move it somewhere else. Get to the solution as quick as you can so that your customer leans forward in their chairs and goes like, and thinks to themselves like, I have to have this. Like, let me stop you, Mark. How did you do that? That's exactly what I want. And all of a sudden, your demo or your solution becomes a conversation. And that's when sales teams win.
That's an argument. Move out the boilerplate stuff. It goes on the addendum, but get to that message way up front.
Kind of like the same thing, Mark, if you like just grab your cell phone and you're going to put directions to drive. It doesn't just tell you what to do. First, it gives you the overview screen. It shows you the end result. It says, hey, Mark, is this the route you want to take? Are we on the right path here? And when you say go, that's when they start to give you more detail. But just so like a conversation with your client, give them the overview, give them the end result, give them the broad spectrum first to make sure you're on the right track. And then you can get into the details, but only when the customer clarifies that that's where they want to go or that's the solution that's going to help them.
I don't know if it's hard or if it's just a behavioral habit to talk about oneself. And some of that's nervous energy that, you're just trying to fill the void. But with practice, they can overcome that. that's not necessary to fill that void, and you can get to their concerns first.
Gartner did a study a few years ago, and it really looked at like buyer behaviors in business-to-business software. What was interesting about this study is they said about only 17% of the average sales cycle is spent with vendors. If there's 3 vendors, that gives you about 5 to 5.5% of your buyer's time. But it also said when they look at like how much time they spend doing research internally and externally, they spend about 45% of their buying cycle doing research. So there's a couple things to think about. One, they already know who you are by the time they've scheduled a demo. They've been to your website. They've looked at all the reviews online. They know a ton about you. As a matter of fact, they think they know what the solution is. And so the concept here isn't to go in and talk about yourself. It's first figure out what do they know and what do they think they need. And then once you understand that, you can craft your solution around that. Make sure you cover those items. But the TLs or the teams that win start to introduce things that the customer doesn't know about. That's where you add value as a salesperson. So you got to figure out what they want, what they know already. We call that re-engineering their vision with a bias towards your capabilities. And then you can present a solution that covers those things. But when you teach your client something that they don't know, now that you know they spend 45% of their time learning about you, then you can change the game.
You know, Paul, every newscast and publication we see on social media and the like, talking about the impacts of AI, which has really been kind of stunning in our lifetimes. How are you seeing generally AI affecting top of funnel activities and other sales activities for your clients and people that you coach?
You know, I see AI just accelerating almost everything. You know, it's interesting. I'm finding that AI is not replacing insight, Mark, but it's kind of demanding a bit more of it. So, I mean, we now get instant data on engagement, on pacing, on talk ratios, and all kinds of things. But the value, I think, still comes from human judgment. Warren Buffett once said that when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked. I think AI is the tide. It reveals who's relying on charm instead of strategy. And I think strong leaders, especially in the training world, are using AI so they can coach with precision and they can do it faster.
You might recall it was a decade or so ago where the concept was mobile first. So mobile first in application development meant, no, don't design for the desktop. Design with mobile first in mind, design that experience, and then go to your desktop and expand it as necessary. And that really bent our brains to begin with. But as we got through it, it was just, what were we thinking? That's the right way to do it. Now in this AI world, the concept is similar, but it's a lot faster than mobile first was. In this world, AI first, I literally find myself and a lot of other guests, we're stopping the actions that we do every day and saying, where can I inject AI to help me on some of the repetitive elements? Yeah, some of that is prompt, some of it is some other places, but I'm just blown away every call. Somebody's teaching me something new. Another one was talking about AI in call centers, how AI agents literally are sitting on calls, but now AI is sitting there. They're listening,
You're right.
but they're offering up to the CSR. Here's a couple next questions that you could follow this up with. And it's so quick and it's natural. It's simply in the natural ebb and flow of a conversation, it's popping up. And at the end of the call, AI is summarizing the entire transcript of that call and sending the CSR a digest with the follow-up questions that need to be tracked down.
There's some other things that I've seen where it's been very, very helpful as well. And that's pre-call planning. So one of the things that we teach at Great Demo is to use something called a situation slide. And it's got 6 elements of information. I think it's the perfect way to tell a story. And AI can help you build it because it talks about either what your customer needs or a customer similar to them so you can start to learn more. And it first identifies what the critical business issue. Why is this truly critical for the company to fix it? And what problems are companies that use our capabilities generally seeing? More importantly, what capabilities do they need that our solution provides? What's the value? But when I go in and I've trained AI that if I just put in a company name, it'll scan the website and it'll pull back that use case for me. And so all of a sudden, when you're first meeting with a client, you might say, hey, well, when I was researching you and I was researching your organization, it reminded me of another customer. I'd love to tell you a quick story. See, I was working with XYZ organization and they were really, really struggling with this. Here's the problems that they had, and here's the capabilities that they needed, of course, that we provided. But you know what's really cool about it, Mark? They said when they implemented that solution, they actually were able to generate another $1 million in revenue. So all of a sudden you're leading into your clients with knowledge. So you're building trust and you've got the right story to tell that's truly tailored to your solution and how it drives value for organizations. And when you can tell that story in 2 minutes or less, all of a sudden your customers listening and they're highly engaged. You've already clarified or articulated value. And then you can ask them simple questions. But, Mark, how does that compare with your situation? And it's a perfect way to enter into discovery, to figure out what your clients need by telling a relevant story that's generated by AI. It's a lot of really cool things that you can do, even proactively instead of real time, so that you're prepared, you sound intelligent, and you got that trust factor that's enhancing with your clients. And you can qualify in or out much faster.
Wow. That's a blend of not only new age, but old school excellence. You might recall I worked for H. Ross Perot when I came out of school, and he would preach about, you talk about stories and experiences that are in the wheelhouse of the prospect client. So in your scenario, doing that background research about situations that are similar to whom you're about to speak with, can kind of build a compelling story. You can look at your own repository and bring forward elements that talk to what they care about, all about them. And that's H. Ross and all that world-class excellence from decades ago. But what you and I have at our disposal, we can go do that research. And anybody who's not doing it, that's an opportunity to improve. Let's say that.
Especially when you can do it so quickly. Mark, just on another note, if it makes sense, you may be familiar with gong.io. Okay. And just for any of the listeners, Gong.io is really kind of a sales enhancement and performance coaching platform. It records all the conversations. And it was interesting because a few years ago, they actually analyzed 3 million software demos. But what I loved about it is they actually came up with some best practices. And so we talked about like using it in real time. We've talked about adding or using AI to prep. But you can also use it in hindsight when you get large forms of data aggregated like 3 million. They said in the later part of your demo, they didn't find a single instance of a demo that won where the demo went longer than 76 seconds without a question from the client. They basically said when you get to the heart of your solution, it has to be a conversation. But what was interesting was the 76-second mark. If you're speaking for longer than 76 seconds, you're probably not winning. The idea is the AI can now provide the coaching, the guidance, the insights also so that we can master the methodology. The cool thing for us, Mark, is it completely validated the great demo methodology, what we've been teaching folks on for nearly 20 years. But
there's that old axiom, Paul, don't talk past the sale. Yes. It was the young salesman that just filled up the air with words that essentially weakened their overall position. Whether it's 76 seconds or more than that, it's got to be interactive later on. Because if I'm lecturing, somebody on my team better be jabbing me or giving me some gesture, pulling on the ear, or doing something to stop it.
Amen.
Paul, when you were speaking earlier about bringing that punch forward, the punch being the thing that we used to save to the end of the demo when everyone was in a coma. You're suggesting that we should change our mindset and bring the strongest thing up front to really engage the client. What came to me was that old school book by Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Oh, yeah. And one of my favorite ones was Design with the End in Mind. Or if you loosely think about it, we want to build a relationship to get us the trust necessary to get to the sale. It's really kind of what hit me on what Greg Demo was talking about right here.
I think you're absolutely right. Just think about going through an entire sales conversation or doing a software presentation, especially kind of the old school way of the setup mode and showing all the capabilities that your solution has, hoping, of course, that your customer sees something that they like along the way if you've kept them awake that long. And then getting to the end and getting to that end result and it not being what the customer wants. It doesn't solve their problem. And the challenge is you've invested 30, 60, 90 minutes into the sales call. You're prepared for it. But the reality is it's a waste of time. I mean, if you went that entire path and didn't give the customer what they wanted, obviously you made your coach or your champion look bad and everyone else looking at them and going like, what is this? Why did you bring these guys in? And so the concept is, and right back to your right to Stephen Covey's number 1 habit, bring that end result right to the beginning. So I think of it like this, Mark. A great demo is like a great movie trailer. Just enough to hook you, but not bore you. So I tell teams all the time, like if you're talking more than your customer, you're probably losing. People don't want a tour guide. They want a partner. And so every extra slide, every uninvited feature, it adds weight to the decision. And so the real pros know when to stop and let the silence sell, but they do it by leading with that most important element right up front. We've also found it's like engagement skyrockets because the customer sees it. And now the questions become, how do I get it? How do I implement that? How do I set that up? And the conversation is really focused. The demo didn't change much, but what did was the engagement. The way you start and the way you ask questions throughout is really where the brilliance is at.
What type of objections do you get from that crowd? Are there ones in the crowd that are standoffish?
The hardest student at the beginning is the person who's done it for 20 years. And they're the one that sits in the back of the room and their arms are always crossed. And they're the ones who always come up after the class to shake my hand and say, like, where have you been for the last 20 years? Or say it's a VP of sales. And all they really need is an immediately generated forecast report. And so that demo might be, hey, VP of sales, check this out. Once you're logged in, you click this button. Here is your sales forecast report. It's interactive, so you can get all the information you need like that quickly. But let me stop there. And let me ask, like, what do you think? What's going through your mind? And that was a one-click demo that may have lasted 30 to 45 seconds, but it's bringing that end result. And then all of a sudden, the VP of sales is going to say, like, here's what I'm thinking. And then you've got the intelligence to react to it, to show them what they actually need so that you can help them make that decision that they need on whether or not you're the right solution and this adds value.
Well, it's humbling for a lot of us who were taught one way, and you can't argue that is so much better, than the way we were taught in the serial mentality that came from the engineering world. That's how we,
It does. We've been classically trained to do that. The other analogy I use, Mark, is let me ask you, do you remember the first time you used a web browser? When the first time you got on the internet?
Yeah, like, the interweb? Yeah.
The interweb. And just guessing, how many years ago do you think that was?
Oh, I'm going to say probably mid-90s, I would think.
Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I was thinking as well. How many login screens and how many software applications do you think you've logged into then over the last 30 years?
Well, I know I have 319 passwords. I can tell you that. I have my password app. I just saw it this weekend.
What I like to pick on people about is like, Mark, do you need to see a login screen to realize that one is there and it works? Like there's so many things like we use every day. I don't need to see you fat finger credit card information or addresses into your application. It's like watching a cooking show. They don't ever let you watch the cake bake, and they mix all the ingredients really fast and they throw it in the oven and they pull one out that's done. But before they even started the cooking show, they showed you what they were going to make for the day to see if you were interested in watching the rest of the show. And that's essentially the same concept that we're applying here. And so we just use human psychology and the things that we learn from the real world every day, like cooking shows, like movie trailers, like so many other things to bring intelligence to your demos so that you sell faster and you sell more.
Excellent. Excellent advice. I got a phone call this week. My best friend from my hometown, he's a submariner, and he knew I was going to be speaking to you this week. And he brought out a point. He goes, Mark, when I was in the Navy, we were constantly training nonstop when we were at sea and whatnot. It was just not only for readiness, but for skip level people above us and to people to my left and right. We were always replicating those pieces. His point was there has to be overlays to the military training and their readiness with corporate sales. With your background, any thoughts about why the military does that and any parallels that we can draw forward to sales organizations' excellence?
So first I'd say go Air Force. It's so interesting. When I've ran 3 global pre-sales organizations, I've carried a bag, I've run sales as well for an organization. And the biggest pushback I think that I ever received is it's the practice. In sales, we call them the dry run. It's like pulling hair. Everyone wants to fight about it. But it's so interesting because I think discipline and repetition builds readiness. And, soldiers drill on the same movements repeatedly so they can respond instinctively when they're under pressure. And in the same token, I think reps must rehearse things like objection handling and discovery questions and demos until it becomes second nature. So that way they can stay composed under stress or not stumble through their slides. To me, it's kind of like muscle memory with a mission. When the stakes are high, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall to your level of training. And so I think the one thing that I took away and I think about from the military aspect of it is you need to be practicing, you need to be rehearsing. And when I train organizations, we do a lot of that training instant during the session itself, so that when folks leave, they can actually go out. And I think part of the same methodology philosophy that the military has is they've got standard operating procedures. They do the exact same thing the exact same way, and everyone does it the exact same way. And that's why I think that, building the true methodologies in our practice helps ensure that when you're under stress, you're doing it the right way. Here's the perfect way to tell a story. This is the great way to dramatically increase engagement when you're going through. This is how you conclude. And what's interesting about that, regardless of customer situation, customer story, and the demo, essentially, you know exactly how to do it. And so that's, for me anyway, long-winded answer, that discipline and repetition is something that sales folks don't do very well. They usually push back, but it's so critical. And using a methodology, just like the military, helps ensure that everyone's doing it the same way.
Excellent. That was the old adage. Sales teams would bristle when it came to repeated methodologies, almost as though this is my way, this is my magic, which is tied to my commissions. What we've learned in the modern approach is to have that bedrock method in which we do it. You can sprinkle your magic sauce over it or whatever, the nuances of your personality, but you can't just pitch it and think it's going to land home, because we have to have some economy of the words that we use. We just can't keep running on and hope that the middle sentence will be strong. I saw a meme. It was kind of funny, but it literally was talking about one of the characters in this cartoonish type thing, that they were objecting to doing cadence calls, the weekend pipe review and whatnot. And you have to have that muscle memory. Is that the experiences that you have, Paul? And how do you teach that when you talk to both leadership and sales teams about the repetitive nature of things that we should do every day, every week?
Well, I think of it in a couple ways. And actually, as you were speaking, Mark, it made me think of like the military lineup in the inspection. Like, imagine this. It's usually a Marine, and they are dressed perfectly. They've got someone over and they're actually inspecting. So they look them up and down. They take their gun and they look at it and they flip it, and then they hand it back and so forth, and they do the inspection. And what I found that when you have a methodology, you can avoid some of the things of the dry run, because you can truly inspect it. Just like that military member is being inspected. They know when the inspection passes that the person knows their job. They know how to prepare. Their gun's ready, so to speak, and they pass. And the same thing happens when you have a true methodology. Instead of clicking through everything in the software and making sure that everything's correlated, the methodology provides a set of documents. That's the story. And the idea is when you have that done, we call it a situation slide, by the way. When you get to see 6 elements that are critical to that client in that specific situation, then you're ready for the demo and you're ready for a solution presentation. And so what I could do with my teams is simply say, look, instead of the dry run or the rehearsal, send me your methodology documents. I want to see your situation slide. I want to see an illustration, which is a visual of that end result that we're looking for. And then I know that you've created that, you've had proper discovery, that you know what the client needs, and then you can give it to them. And I also know that if you take your demo and you turn it into a conversation, that your click path is going to change. I don't need to see it because I've inspected you before and I know you know the software. Now I just need to make sure you can have the conversation and you're prepared. And so I think of those things as having that methodology is absolutely critical to making sure that you've got, repetition and readiness ready to go. What do you think of that?
Well, it's of the many things I love about Great Demo. Having a methodology that can be repeated, taught, trained, scaled, how to do discovery all the way through it. In some of the materials I had read, it made references to the forgetting curve. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you recall people's ability to remember matters that are presented to them, and what is the antidote to really get them to understand that and embed that in their forward behaviors?
Yeah, it's when I mispronounced the name, I thought it was like Newsomberg's forgetting curve. It basically implies this, that people forget the majority of what you say. About 50% of a software demonstration or a sales pitch or even a training session is forgotten within the first hour. It says within the first week, about 70% is forgotten. And, by the end of 2 weeks or, a couple of weeks later, almost 80% of what is presented is forgotten. And so the idea is you need to figure out, what do people remember and when do they remember them, so you can provide the right information at the right time. And so without that repetition, without ensuring that you get the right information, you can guarantee that people are going to forget most of what you say when you're meeting with clients.
Well, that speaks to the overall sales fabric, meaning leadership has to buy off on this. It can't simply be, all right, you guys go to training, I'm going to go do my thing. Leadership has to be totally lockstep. And in many cases out in front. Like, no. We're going to do that in every funnel report that we have every Thursday, or whatever cadences they have, weekly, monthly, quarterly, all of them, where they just hone in on that, just like the military comments. It's the leadership's duty to absolutely do that and make it part of the overall culture, that it's like, no, if you don't do it, that's weird. We do this so that we can talk to ownership, our boards, everybody else in our proximity has confidence in what we're saying and we're accurate.
Absolutely. You must inspect what you expect. That's a key takeaway. If you're going to do training, if you're going to have a methodology, you have to reinforce it, because people aren't lazy, but they are very focused and they're very busy. And it's so much easier to go back and use that muscle memory of the way that they've done things, in the previous years. So you must inspect what you expect. That underscores the principle that accountability requires visibility.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. I might do a cheer here, Paul, after hearing that. That's fantastic wisdom. Paul, this next section is one of my favorites. It's where we get a chance to ask each guest if they had a chance to go in their proverbial Wayback Machine, crawl in there and go back to a time when they were younger in their career. What type of advice might they give themselves about the road ahead?
What I would tell young leaders is you don't need all of the answers. You just need better questions. I mean, so many times there's things you don't understand. You're going to have questions about how to do things. You may even feel lost and overwhelmed. It's okay. You don't need all the answers. You just need better questions. Well, the best leaders don't make the most noise. They create the most clarity. Leadership isn't a spotlight. It's a mirror. It reflects who you are when things get tough to some extent. It's interesting. There was some advice someone gave me when I was young, and they said, first of all, work harder than everybody else. If you get in at 6 in the morning and you work at 6 at night, you're working 12 hours. If someone else is doing 8 hours, by the end of the year, you actually have 50% more experience. And at the 2-year mark, you actually have an extra year of experience on them. And, I think the person that I'm thinking of had said, work hard when you're young and build that foundation, build the excellence. And so that you've got the muscle memory. I think they told me, Paul, you can coast a little bit when you're in the 40s. And I laugh because I'm in my 50s and I don't remember coasting. My perspective would be, don't worry about all being the know-it-all. Just know what questions to ask so you can get the information you need and then commit. I guess there's something I taught someone one time, which is you don't have to be impressive every day, but there are moments like when being impressive and being just amazing will carry you to some extent. It'll set the reputation. In sales, it's that key deal that you have to win. You may not always be on, but when it's time to go, those are the moments that you have to invest significantly, 20-hour days for weeks at a time so that you get to win. Because those are the things that really, I think, put the capstone in your career. Those are the moments, you get a few of those every year and you got to be ready to play. That's the advice that I would give folks. Ask better questions. And when it's game time, be ready to dig in and play so that you're building the foundation of your career that you can build on for the rest of your career and move into leadership, positions.
Oh, that's some great wisdom there, Paul. I could so relate to trying to work hard as everybody else. And I would color your comments that I did that, but I kept quiet about it. I would go home every night and I would rehearse for the next day, whether that's written or I had to speak. I'd be in front of the mirror and I'd stay in uniform. So I would get used to it. My logic is from a smaller town, both of us went to Eastern Illinois University and you got all these prestigious degrees all the way around me. And I'm like, you know what? One thing I can do is I can work harder than everybody else. But I kept quiet about what my behaviors were so that when I came to a meeting, the best praise I could get is like, hey, nice job, Drummond. Boy, you were really sound on that one. Or, I don't know, give it to Drummond. He'll do it. He's pretty good at that stuff. I would practice like the Dickens and not telling anybody and then come in and over deliver the best I could.
I'll tell you my first job out of college. So I came with military experience, but my undergrad was in finance. I was an MBA with finance and economics. I knew a little bit about computers because of my military experience, but my first job out of college was essentially to be a computer programmer. And so I went through this amazing SED training development, 6 to 8 weeks of intensive work. And I had to for the first time understand what a database normalization looked like in the interrelationship of primary and foreign keys. Didn't teach that in the military or in finance classes. And I remember my first consulting assignment, and I didn't know if I was positioned as a junior consultant or a senior, but I had my double-breasted suits. I went in every day. I drove 90 minutes to work where I worked for 8 hours a day, pretending like I knew what I was doing. I left the office every day. I had a stack of programming books. And I would study it because I couldn't let anyone know, especially the client, that I might not have had as much experience as what I just envisioned I might have been positioned as. And so I totally get it, man. Those crazy hours and making sure, the project was a success, fortunately. And anyway, but I think about that. You brought back so many memories of that hard work and the discipline.
The funny part of that for the audience is that I was the culprit that was training you on that stuff and creating that anxiety in your life, Paul. Sorry about that.
Yeah. I should let the cat out of the bag. I actually worked for Mark, my first job out of college. Amazing job and career. Learned a ton, but there was a standard and there was a pride that went with that standard too. The way we walked around in those suits, we felt we were part of something really, really big. And that was cool to be a part of that, but it's cool, those lessons that came from that we've used for the rest of our career.
Paul, when we talked to all our old colleagues that we went through those insane, intense programs, and you knew I was a nut about it. Everybody went through it, whether you're going to go into sales or engineering or QA or whatever walk that you were going to go in, everybody had to go through it. And I just love hearing the stories where specifically people that weren't technical that went through them and gaining the respect of their colleagues. But it couldn't just be, I only do X. You at least had to have an appreciation and understanding. And beyond all of that, it was how to get that pride, that degree of confidence that, you walked in that double-breasted suit and you had a degree of confidence behind your words, but you also had some humility in your back pocket so that you didn't understand something, you'd run home and you do some studying or you track down another colleague for coaching and assistance about how to handle it next time. Or better yet, you may circle back with that same client and say, you know what, Sue or Tom, I had a chance to think about what I responded to you before, and I want to alter what I shared with you. Here's another approach to that particular problem. I call it moxie or, professionalism, that we would come back, fess up, and say, here's another approach that we could have entertained. I thought that was just great muscle memory for everybody in the organization.
I agree. Yeah, good memories, good times, and good lessons that I think all leaders can use and take away. So good, man.